Could the Israelites have freed themselves from Egyptian bondage? They probably had the numbers, skills, and resources to overcome their Egyptian masters, but God never intended that his people free themselves through a slave revolt. Moses apparently tried to do just that, but ended up in exile on the backside of the desert, an outcast both from the Hebrew nation into which he had been born and the Egyptian nation that had adopted him. Suppose that Israel had freed themselves. What then? Would God's covenant nation have gone on to take possession of Canaan, or would they have established the next dynasty to rule over Egypt? That seems the most likely outcome. The slaves would become the masters, and in time they would be no less tyrannical as the native Egyptian rulers. Moreover, they likely would have merged whatever they understood of the one true God with the gods of Egypt, creating a hybrid religion and culture that the Lord would have found just as abominable as the golden calf. That is, assuming the Hebrews could have united themselves under a leader like Moses and successfully gathered support from other foreigners and from native Egyptians who had their own grievances against the ruling elite. Considering the history of conflict in Jacob's family, both before and after the Egyptian sojourn, it's not certain that they could have done so before Pharaoh crushed the ringleaders. When we look at it this way, we begin to see why Israel needed to be redeemed, both from Egyptian oppression and from the festering rot within their own hearts. Now we know why God had to go to all that trouble to bring judgment on Egypt and to reveal himself to his chosen people. He did exactly that through a combination of human free will and divine intervention. In the process, he brought about a far greater deliverance than human agency alone could have accomplished. It's the kind of deliverance that inspired Peter and Paul to quote the prophet Joel. "Then all who call on Adonai's name will escape. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be rescue, as Adonai has said, among the survivors whom Adonai is calling." A common translation of the line from Joel is, "Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." It's a simple statement, but we make it complicated. The agent of salvation is the Creator, whose name from the Hebrew is transliterated as Yahweh. How to call on his name isn't specified. Do we call out a specific name pronounced in a specific way? Do we simply say, "God save me"? Do we have to speak at all? Maybe calling on his name can be done by actions, such as putting the blood of a lamb on the doorposts of a house when that instruction is given. Or maybe it's just being intentional about associating with godly people and trying to learn from them. This is where we can get caught up in our various formulas of orthodoxy. We know that Yeshua is the only name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. That name still bears the meaning salvation. Even in the English transliteration, Jesus. People have been calling on his name even before humanity knew the name refers to a specific person as well as the God of Israel. The ancient Hebrews knew that the God of Israel would bring about his salvation, but they didn't have the revelation that he would do so by coming to earth as Messiah Yeshua, the Son of God and Son of Man. Because God is salvation, the way is wide open for people to call on the name of the Lord and be saved, or redeemed from the curse of death. That's the thing we could never do for ourselves. It's why we need a high priest of the order of Melchizedek, the only priest of that order, to enter the temple in heaven and carry his own blood as atonement for us all. That's the witness of the book of Hebrews. But when Messiah appeared as high priest of the good things that have now come, passing through the greater and more perfect tent not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation, he entered into the holies once for all, not by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, having obtained eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling those who have been defiled sanctify for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, cleanse our conscience from dead works to serve the living God? It would be very helpful if we retained the connection of this passage with the Torah instructions about what the Levitical high priest did on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The writer of Hebrews never intended that the connection should be broken. Messiah's heavenly priesthood doesn't replace the earthly priesthood of Aaron's family, but rather does what that earthly priesthood could never do: bring redemption from the eternal curse of death. What we shall see when the temple and the priesthood are functioning again is that the earthly counterpart to the heavenly priesthood is still necessary to deal with those post-redemption issues related to daily life among imperfect humans. We will learn what sanctify for the cleansing of the flesh means when we see the Jewish priests carrying out those functions. Why is this important? Because salvation is only the first step. God expects us to come from all directions and at all levels of human experience to call on his name for salvation. He will not refuse any of us who do so. What happens next demonstrates whether we're serious about living out the call he places on those he has redeemed. If all we want is to be rescued from whatever bad situation we are in, whether it's a narcissistic relationship, a life of crime, or an imperfect body shape, then we'll have little interest in attaining the fullness of his vision for each of us. He doesn't want formula-keeping robots, nor does he want those who honor him with their lips, but do whatever they desire. That's why he gives us detailed instructions on how to avoid idolatry, how to flee sexual immorality, and how to abstain from blood. His expectation is that we will study to show ourselves approved in his eyes as holy people, living out sanctified lives even in our continued imperfections. We make much of the new covenant instituted through Messiah Yeshua's blood, and rightly so. What we don't understand yet is that he redeemed us so we could fulfill our part of that covenant, which he made with the house of Israel. That's why he wants to see the two parts of his covenant people brought close to one another so they can uplift and learn from one another. It's what he's doing in this season, much to our surprise. Who would have guessed that Christians and Jews could find common ground and begin to walk together as brethren? Where we are going is still unclear, which is why we focus on the journey at the moment rather than the destination. Each of us knows we have not and cannot redeem ourselves. As long as we keep that in mind, we can help each other along the way toward the ultimate meeting with our Redeemer.